the coach. His name was Dustin Felder, because remember it was an acting class I had never done. So he was like, stand-up comedy is your into the industry.
Of all the teachers, I said the one guy that really made an impact, that tangible and gave me a different outlook was Bill Hall.
My dad, he's been in law enforcement for over 20 years. He taught like the 4 rules of gun safety.
It was always the Mets, but like right out of the gate, it was Carter and Keith Hernandez. Those were the guys.
You know, I just want to say thank you. I've been watching since I was a kid. Like I watched the Chappelle Show, and we would recite that shit all the time.
It surprised me how much I enjoyed. I coached my daughter's softball team this year. It was one of the best times of my life.
I dedicated this to Angela because I would not have done any of the stuff that I've been doing had it not been for her.
What's up? Welcome to the People We Love podcast. This is episode number 165, and I am Adam Choit. For more about this show, head to People We Love podcast. That will send you to a link tree for all the things where you can subscribe. I'm on Rumble now as well, so subscribe there if you're on there. I'm at Adam Choit, Instagram, Twitter, adamchoit.com for everything else I'm working on. What is this, my fifth stream for this show? So these have been fun. I've been sticking to it so far every Monday night, 11 p.m. Eastern, doing the late night stream for the East Coasters. So I appreciate you guys in the other time zones hanging in there. But this will be fun today. We'll talk about what's inspiring us lately, of course, and maybe some other current events and creativity and culture and all sorts of things we'll dive into. And I can't wait to talk to today's guests. Sara Anne Fox, who is a story development executive and writer herself, a screenwriter, and Luke Guidici, also a filmmaker, editor, writer. I'm probably missing half of these people's slash lines, and they could tell me more about all of their creative endeavors when we bring them on. And also Juliet Annerino, a returning guest of the show, who's also a writer, performer, singer, friend. Everybody, they're all my friends coming on, so I definitely appreciate this panel, and we'll have a lot to talk about and discuss. So let's bring everybody in. What's up? We're all here. Hello, testing.
Hello.
Oh,
hi everybody.
Hello, everybody. Sara Anne and Luke actually met recently because Luke and I are part of a little screenwriters writers group, and Sara Anne popped by and was a guest of ours. So you guys just recently connected, and that's cool. And Juliet is a friend of mine here in Los Angeles, where I'm based. And I'm sorry, Juliet. I know I did mention the writers group to you, and you should because you do express interest in sitting in or listening. And we've had a couple of people. I have another friend, Vincent, who just kind of sits in and listens, and another sort of liberty-minded creator. So you should definitely, if you're down.
I'm down.
I use the same StreamYard format, so it'll feel like a podcast. But why don't we start with Sara Anne, because we may not have you as long as the others. But why don't you tell people about yourself and your creative journey? I'll give you the floor. That's a very vague question, but why don't you tell people about yourself and start the conversation?
I have no problem talking about myself.
That's great.
Just trying to make it as entertaining as possible. My full name is Sara Anne, but my nickname is Saran, like the rap. And I was in feature film with a producer at 20th Century Fox many, many years ago. And I worked for a couple of other companies. And now for almost 30 years, I've had my own business working with screenwriters, memoirists, and novelists. And as Adam mentioned, I'm a writer myself. So I like to say I'm not in the business anymore, but I'm of the business. So it's always a pleasure to have clients who have some modicum of talent and help them develop that and work on their project. I have one client. We've worked on 3 projects, and one of them is in pre-production now. And so I'm very pleased, because when we started, he was a good writer, and now he's a terrific one. And he was willing and teachable, and I was willing and teachable. And I'm very proud of him and very pleased to have been just a part of it, to advocate for him, encourage him, and be tough on him sometimes. But he was willing And I think that when all life asks of us is to be willing and teachable, which is really challenging for me at any given moment, So that's what I do. And I'm here because Adam and I know each other from an organization where I was a mentor and he was a budding filmmaker, and he honed his craft, and I saw his progress, which is amazing. And I think it just goes to show you that if you have to have some bit of talent to be a good screenwriter, to be a good, you have to have like even a little kernel that can be developed. But if you don't have that, do something else. And it sounds harsh, I know. People sit down and write screenplays and they never get better, and that's because they need to apply their gifts and talents to something else. But I always admire people who try. I just like to have the caveat of you've got to have some kind of an ability, and then the willingness and teachability. And when you write, I know that when I write, everybody I've ever given birth to, slept with, been married to, known, it's when you're in that alpha state, you read this scene after and you say, holy moly, where'd that come from? And it came from me. I think anytime I write or I'm writing about myself in some form, but it's hard to recognize. Or I'm writing about I think when we write, we just lay our life. If you're willing to do it, you just lay yourself out, warts and all, and then just dive in, and you'll be surprised at what anybody who's a writer who's listening. Once you start and once you get into it, you'll surprise yourself. I know that I surprise myself every time I sit down to write. But I really love, and I really love working with all kinds of writers to help them tell their story. At the bottom of my email, under my signature, is a quote from Pat Conroy, who wrote The Prince of Tides, or as Streisand called it, The Prince of Tides. She ruined a really good book. In that movie, that's just my opinion, obviously. It's a quote from Pat Conroy, and it says, the four most powerful words in English are "tell me a story." And I also think if I had a second account, it would be, what are the next four most important words after "tell me a story"? And the next four are, and then what happens? I mean, that's structure. I mean, that's the basic, Shakespeare to soap operas. What happens next? And you invested to some degree, one degree or another, into characters and outcomes and conflict. All drama is about conflict. And the family in some form, and it's all about conflict and change and uprooting the status quo. So that's me. And so I'm anxious to hear more from Luke, and also to discover who Juliet is. Juliet, that's some great head of hair you got there, I got to say.
I want to hear. I
was admiring your hair. That you are one of those people that can do this to it, and it never looks bad. Never looks bad.
Everybody,
We're both curly-haired people.
Everyone's got nice hair. Everyone's got nice hair on this. I want to ask you a couple of more things first, Sara Anne. You're from the East Coast originally?
Fall River, Massachusetts, and New York.
From that, but you've been in Los Angeles and LA for
I don't want to tell you how long.
Okay, fair enough. A long time. Did you grow up loving movies and TV?
Yes, I grew up in a cultured home. Great TV. My parents were members of the Theater Guild for 60 years. They saw everything in Boston and New York, and they took me. I saw Streisand and Funny Girl. I saw Ethel Merman and Gypsy, on and on. Books. My mother was a librarian and teacher, and the written word, drama, opera, ballet. It was just part of our life, And so, and then I met my late husband, was a brilliant screenwriter, and memorized all of Shakespeare. He was a brilliant actor. He went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts with Grace Kelly, and was there a great comedic actor. But he didn't have the burning desire. I think if you're going to be an actor or a writer or anything creative, you have to have a burning desire. It's like, this is all I want to do. And he turned to writing, and he was a very fine writer. But he's been gone about 25, 26 years now. So,
what was his name? What was his name?
Theodore Fox. Nothing ever got made, but he worked a lot.
That's important. That helps.
Yeah, I know. And he was the son of a circus performer, the oldest child of a circus performer. That's also a movie. Cool. And we have two grown sons, so he lives on in them, and they're funny and smart and creative. So I tell young people, listen, if you're gonna have kids, raise them to be entertaining, because you want to be sitting around with your children and be bored. It's like, so raise them to amuse you.
Is that what children are for? Is to amuse the parents?
Oh, absolutely. It was a must for me. Unfortunately, my kids are creative and very, very funny. Very funny.
There could be even a dark side to this. I remember I've heard like Roseanne Barr talk on a couple of podcasts about her father. Like if her jokes weren't funny, she like there were like consequences,
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
like that's wild. I don't think she was embellishing that. Like it's a like there can be creatives can be very militant as well. That's probably something too.
We were sweet with them. I'm being entertaining here. If my kids weren't funny and made me laugh, I would still love them. But I really enjoy my children's company, my son's company, and yeah. So
yeah, it's great. No, I appreciate you sharing all that. Why don't we go to Luke? You could tell me about maybe a little bit your background and creative journey from a kid, and maybe some of those poignant moments or influences from film, TV, culture. Was it your parents? Was it what you caught and whatnot?
Yeah. So one thing that's a little interesting and different about me is I grew up in a home without a TV. So when I was 6, I broke my parents' TV and we never got another one. So basically from 6 to 19, when I left and went to college, I had no TV in the house. I'd watch TV at friends' houses and, at my grandparents', but not at home. At home, we read, played with Legos, played out in the woods. I like to say, like, every day I learned to tell my own stories because I had to imagine them myself. But we saw movies. We'd go to the cinema and see movies. So there's like 2 things that my parents read to me when I was little that have really stuck with me, and I think influenced a lot of what I'm interested in, at least as a storyteller. So The Hobbit was one of them. I think my dad read that to me a couple times. And then The Chronicles of Narnia. And so we read that several times all the way through, both my parents reading it to me and then my sister later, and then reading it on my own. And then Calvin and Hobbes was another big one for me. So we'd get the paper, and that was like my daily TV show, was like reading the comics and reading like the editorial cartoons. I always loved editorial cartoons, like from a very early age. And if I didn't understand them, like the nuances to whatever like kind of political thing they were saying, I would ask my dad. He would explain it to me. Might explain some of where I am now. So Calvin and Hobbes was like the daily, like the thing we'd look forward to every day, getting the comics and reading Calvin and Hobbes. And there was a Spider-Man one that was in the paper for a long time. Very different than a Spider-Man comic, in hindsight, thinking about it, because of doing it in a 3 or 4 panel strip and having to make it make sense day to day. It's a lot easier, I think, to do non-serialized comic strips. But I have somewhere, probably in a box here now, because I think my parents made me take everything from their house. I have a bunch of that Spider-Man comic cut out and like taped to paper because I saved it so I could reread it. I should try to scan that and like, I don't know, at least have a PDF.
From your childhood, a Spider-Man comic?
Yeah, a Spider-Man daily comic strip. Like, I don't even know.
Strip,
I'm sure we could Google it and it would exist somewhere in like a paperback. But it was such like a weird, interesting thing. Like, I don't remember after that. I think there was a Superman one too that I've seen. But after that, like, I don't ever remember seeing like a superhero daily comic strip.
Yeah, I remember Dennis the Menace, Garfield, and Peanuts. The ones that were the TV shows were the ones that I was
Yeah.
most interested in reading because I kind of knew them from the TV. So I'm like, oh, this is just like you're saying, like it's you get kind of like a similar dopamine hit, and you're getting your TV cartoon in meme form, in panel
Yeah.
form, essentially.
Yeah.
It's funny how you said it makes sense to where where you are creatively and professionally now. Like it's like I'm thinking about my current interest in memes. Like, oh yeah, I did have an early something hit me early with the memes and just like the cartoons and even some of the political or sarcastic or those elements, the satire that even we didn't understand it, we knew there was something fun and subversive about these things, about these comic strips. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bremerton, Washington. It's west of Seattle, across the Puget Sound on the Olympic Peninsula. So it's kind of we had a big Navy base there, Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, and then there's Bangor and Keyport, which are submarine bases. So we had like some people who would commute over to Seattle and work. You take a ferry boat right across the water. It takes about an hour. And then we had a lot of people that worked in the shipyard. And then there was a fair amount of people that did more like, forestry or construction, that sort of stuff. So it was a very kind of a blue collar town, but with this interesting mix because the Navy was such a big presence there too.
This is Paul in the chat, a friend of mine. I was stationed in Bremerton. He said,
"Nice,
small. Yeah, he's been all over."
A very large amount of people, if they served in the Navy, have been through Bremerton, either stationed there or just been through it at one point. So even though it's not a very big place, it's surprisingly well known. But it's kind of like being from Bremerton is kind of like being from, I don't know, Van Nuys or Chatsworth or something for SoCal people. So it's
Luke, did you go to school for film? When did you get into film? Yeah.
Yeah, I had so I did a TV production class in high school, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed the kind of the storytelling puzzle, how you're putting together a story with pictures and sound and time. And so I decided I wanted to study filmmaking. So I moved to California and got my residency because school is way cheaper if you're a resident of California. And then I moved to San Francisco, and I went to San Francisco State, and I studied cinema and digital art there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Looking back, are you thankful? Is that one of the things that you feel about not having a TV in your home growing up? To me, that's so interesting, and I feel like my own personal opinion about that would like change if either from the point of view of a friend who doesn't have a TV in their home for whatever reason, or if myself like didn't have one or something like that, because it's so commonplace, and I don't know. I feel like you almost be thankful that you have like this unique upbringing. I feel like, but I'm curious about that.
Well, I am. I mean, like, what did I miss out on? Like watching Friends, watching like Animaniacs like after school every day. Like, I mean, I don't think Friends is good, but Animaniacs had definitely some redeeming qualities to it. But yeah, I remember one time this guy had junior high maybe, but they found out I didn't have a TV, and they were really like aghast at it, and they were like, "Well, how do you know what to wear?"
That's funny.
I was like, I just pick out stuff I like, I guess. I don't know. It seems really strange.
That box.
Yeah,
that box controls a lot and speaks to a larger, societal thing, and how much mind control really goes on through this box. We can get into that. Juliet, how are you doing?
I'm hanging in. Sorry, I had to give somebody a timeout there.
Oh, we got cat troubles over there. Well, you're returning, but why don't you tell people a little about like where you grew up and some of your creative influences and what movies, TV shows, and music. I know music's a big part of your life growing up.
Yeah. I'm from Chicago, And I was really enjoying both of you talk about storytelling and what you were influenced by and what you were not influenced by. That also figures in greatly about your no TV upbringing. It's fascinating to me. Yeah, I would have been just aghast that you didn't have a TV because although we weren't watching a color TV, we watched our black and white TV. And when I went to friends' places and they had color TVs, I thought, whoa, what is this magic? But I'll never forget one story that had a great impact on me. Perhaps the greatest in my young life was the story of Scheherazade. If you're not familiar with it, it's the basis story of the tales from the Arabian Nights, 1001 Tales from Arabian Nights. And what made it so singular to me, so special to me, was that unlike all of the other fairy tales like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, it's these romances where they're kind of a love at first sight thing. And of course, the prince is the best guy in the world that you want to marry. And of course, this woman is absolutely beautiful. And the values are set on these superficial characteristics or these assumptions, these societal assumptions. Unlike that, Scheherazade first introduces the importance and then expands on the importance of the intellect. Because if you're not familiar with the story, it has to do with Scheherazade is the heroine, and there is a king who has been bitter and saddened by, I think it was an unfaithful wife. And in any case, he became really rotted to the core because of this and vindictive. And so his practice became marrying a new wife every day and then putting her to death the next day. So his grand vizier actually is going through the land and choosing his next wife, a pretty terrible task. And his two daughters are Dinrazade and Scheherazade. And Scheherazade says to her father, the Grand Vizier, allow me to wed the king. And of course, he doesn't want his own daughter to be beheaded the next day. So he refuses. And she says, no, I have a plan. I have an idea. You have to do this. This bloodshed cannot go on. All of the women in the kingdom are dying because of this insane king. So finally, he agrees. She marries the king, and then she has one request as they're going to go to sleep that night before bed. She says, I have this one tradition, king. The tradition is to give a bedtime story to my little sister, Dinrazade. Would you please allow me just this one thing? He's curious, so he allows her this. The story is so fascinating, so interesting. Of course, she ends on a cliffhanger, right? You guys know your Hollywood, right? And that the king is intrigued and fascinated enough to allow her to live for one more day. So the following evening, she can weave her tale, which she does, into the next tale, and he can find out how this ends. But he keeps being fascinated. And over time, over 1001 nights, he falls in love with her. Because of what? Because she's so beautiful? Because she's just hot? No. Because of her intellect, her creativity. This is why I love this story.
And that is piggybacking on what I mentioned before, which is tell me a story and then what happens.
Yes.
And that's what kept him hanging on, because he wanted to know what happened next. Then he had that wonderful resolution, but he wanted more story,
Yes.
So somebody said that the universe is not made of atoms, it's made of stories.
I love
so
that.
I really appreciate your reminding us about the story of Scheherazade. Tell us more about yourself.
I was gonna say she must have looked good though too. It couldn't have been just the story. She first intrigued him with probably her physical beauty, and then hooked him in with the story and kept it going. But the two can work hand in hand. It could be a balance or a percent breakdown.
For sure, absolutely, beauty throughout.
Yeah, no, you can feel free to tell us more about yourself. This is casual. Now, like you guys can definitely jump in anytime and ask each other questions and comment, and et cetera, et cetera.
That influenced me, and I think most of my creative endeavors, in that I wanted to get to the heart of the story. I wanted to get to the soul of the story. I wanted to get to the why behind the what. You can't just be a princess, lose your slipper, and then live happily ever after when you realize the whole thing, the absurdity of the stories that were told, most of them when we're growing up, always rubbed me the wrong way. I was a little cynic when I was even 6 and 7 years old. I was always doubting, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And so I think that curiosity, and you mentioned that, Sarah, to keep curious. I love the lessons that you gave us in, your short introduction, to stay curious, to always wonder more. And that's, I think, how we stay young too. I'm realizing it anyway. I feel like it. If we stay curious and we stay fascinated, but we have to, it does take effort. It's not a thing that just comes down as a gift. At least when you're young, it does. And then when you get older, I think that's part of it. That's part of maturing in a healthy way, is staying curious. So that's why I try to do that. So yeah, as a musician, I've been drawn to creativity and to improvisation, which drew me to jazz. And as a storyteller, I've been drawn to things that are a little unusual and exotic. And yeah, so I'm looking at storytelling applied in different ways. For instance, applied in therapy. I've become certified as a hypnotherapist, and I'm looking at how storytelling can be very powerful, as a powerful tool used metaphorically to help people to come to their own realizations, their own conclusions through storytelling.
How's that going, by the way? We spoke. You gave
fun.
A little update, but I'm curious if there's any further, because that's definitely
Super
something
fun.
that's super intriguing to me, is the idea of hypnotizing people.
It's, to me, it's been fascinating to me since I was a little kid. I was just telling another friend this. I'll share this quick story. I don't want to take too much time. So
We'll get time.
Okay. But I'll just share one story. So I was so fascinated with everything about psychology, mythology, and psychology and mythology were my main focuses when I was 8 or 9. So I took out every book that I could from the little local library that I belonged to in the suburbs of Chicago. That's where I really grew up. And I started getting into studying hypnosis by the founders of it, basically the founders of modern hypnosis, because hypnosis itself has been around for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians were practicing it for medicinal and religious works. So I was reading about group hypnosis and mass hypnosis and how institutions and religions use this. And then my mother, because I grew up Catholic, she got this memo from our local Catholic church to go to this charismatic meeting. This was a trend at the time, where one of the priests would give this sort of blessing. He would put his hand on the foreheads of people, go around in a circle, put his hands on the foreheads of the people, and they would be stricken in the Holy Spirit. I'm just telling you what they said. And then they would fall backward, being struck with the Holy Spirit, and maybe they'd be healed. Maybe they would have some kind of revelation. I don't know. But for me, since I had been studying hypnosis, I recognized this to be mass hypnosis. So I wasn't a believer. And the funny thing is, I was a kid. I was 13 or 14, maybe. No, not even 14. I was definitely young. And we joined the group. We held hands, and the priest went around and he put his hand on our foreheads, and people were dropping like flies, except I didn't, because I wasn't buying it. I already got the memo, which was kind of unfortunate for my mom. And she was disappointed that I didn't fall back, but it was kind of funny to me. It's still funny to me because I was just a little kid. Anyway.
That's wild that people were they just touch their heads and they
they
fall
were
backwards,
down like leaves. Yeah.
Were they acting? Was it per?
Oh no, they weren't acting. No. They were feeling it, because when you see what happens to someone else, it has a great power.
Yeah,
it's
I
monkey
believe
see,
that.
monkey do.
It's like yawning.
It's very
real. Yawning. Is that what you said, Sara Anne?
Yeah, you see someone yawn, you yawn. Yeah.
Sometimes the same thing with vomiting. Too.
You're hilarious, dude.
I think it's very interesting that you talk about the importance of story, because I have a one of my clients is also a very well-known psychologist who
Cool.
only as a last resort would recommend that his clients be prescribed psychotropic drugs. He said
Interesting.
because what it's doing, it's the last resort. It's he's very much against it as a matter of course, because how he works, and he's been ostracized and criticized, but in the healing process, that to get to their story, not the story that they've been told is their story, but their story, because we all have a story, and for many of us, there's a deeper and more real story lurking underneath, the things we automatically say, the hurts, the wounds, the thwarted desires, all of that. And so I really appreciated your talking about using hypnotherapy to get people to tell storytelling. What's your story? Years ago, I wrote a column for a creative organization called So What's the Story? And, it's like New York. Oh, so what's the story? Because that's it. The basis of everything is basically a story. And, the older I get, the more stories I tell myself, because my history is longer, and sometimes I wonder, did I make that up? Am I embellishing this memory? The negative memories become more positive. I don't know what it is. It's detachment. It's growth. I don't know. But I
The
think
passage of time, maybe it's
the passage of time, but also I think those of us who can tell our story, we make fabulous dinner guests, because the other side of telling our story for me, and it took me a while to learn this, to let it grow up into this, is to be interested in other people's stories, and sometimes they don't even realize they have an interesting one. To turn to someone and you've heard something that they say and you follow up and say, well, tell me about that. Or you relate something, and then they open up, and if, these shy people or very self-involved people say, well, I don't know how to get people to like me. I said, just act interested in them. And sometimes it's an act because you're being polite, but other times you make a connection that's so powerful. And then you go home and you make them a character in your screenplay, right, Luke? So,
it's essentially. And before I started doing these live streams for this podcast, my episodes were more or less interviews, casual conversations, similar to the tone of this for sure, but more or less kind of like interviews, and going from childhood to college, a young adult, and then going into creative professional things in the second half of it. But it's always been, I lost my train of thought there. It'll come back. But
can I tell a story? Can I tell a story?
Yeah, sure.
About movie stars? Okay.
Sure.
So when I was working many years ago at Fox, we were in the executive building on the third floor. That's where all the creatives were. And then the commissary was maybe a very long block and a half walk. Okay. So I'm coming back from lunch to my office, and in the distance approaching me, but in the distance is a man walking, and his body was so familiar to me. And I thought, where's my husband? Oh, he's home with the kids. Is that my father? Is that my brother? No, they're on the East Coast. That was, is that no. And I went through every male in my family, and it wasn't. But the walk, the attitude was so familiar. It was just resonating with me. Like if you see your husband, your wife, your loved one, your child approaching, there's this familiarity, or your best friend, whatever. And as he's walking towards me and I start to recognize him, I realized it was Paul Newman. And because he'd been on the screen for a million years, since that, his physicality was almost in my DNA. I was imbued with his physicality because I had seen him on the screen, that walk.
Wow.
And that attitude.
That is so cool.
We could have a whole discussion about the importance of the charisma of real movie stars and how they reflect back who we are and how we invest in them. So
I love that. It's great. It's beautiful. I went to a club a few years ago and I saw this guy and I thought, I know that guy. He's a musician. I walked right up to him. I said, dude, where do I know you from? You're a musician, right? He said, no, I'm an actor. He's on Parks and Recreation.
Right.
The funny thing is, I knew him. He didn't know me.
That's right. And all
Yeah,
I
you
did was
get-
say hello. All I did
It's
was say hello
hilarious.
to that gorgeous man as I walked by.
Yeah, you can get confused or not be sure where you know a face or a person. Like, was that from a TV or film? Do I know them from my real life? Especially living in Los Angeles, that can happen. You reminded me of this some semi-viral video. I think I saw it on Instagram where this guy would, in like a public park, he kind of just like snuck up sidling alongside people and would imitate their walks, which was total. And he would nail it pretty well. Like after just like one stride, he's doing it in the same pace, like right along,
That's funny.
and very like to a T. It's pretty funny. Like, so something about like definitely the way people walk is like that can be like a doppelganger from behind. I see sometimes. Again, like my parents are on the East Coast, and I'm like, oh, that's my mom's doppelganger. She has that jacket, that hairstyle, about that height. Same thing with my dad.
Cool.
Different races. That's the Hispanic version of my dad. That's the Indian version of my mom. Like with the hair and the coat, whatever. Yep.
I want to hear about your inspirations, Luke. Sorry, did I?
Yeah, Maya, go
Adam?
for it. No, jump into it.
Oh, well, let's see. So I already mentioned Calvin and Hobbes, and The Hobbit. So kind of the Lord of the Rings in general, I guess. It's interesting, talking about it right now because fantasy was such a big part of growing up for me, like high fantasy, Chronicles of Narnia, The Hobbit, Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold, the Shannara Chronicles, but I haven't written anything in that genre yet, which is kind of weird because it was like the Willow, the Princess Bride, like those sorts of like adventure-y fantasy tales were like a really big influence on me.
What are you writing?
I'm wondering why I haven't written that. What am I writing?
Yeah, she was asking.
What are you working on?
Well, mostly I've been writing like the last 10 years. I've been trying to write low budget genre projects, something that I could get someone to give me money to direct. And most of them are in like the sci-fi, supernatural, or some sort of like crossover between those. The most recent one is something that Adam helped me on in the screenwriters group. It's a road trip where two former best friends go looking for jackalopes. So I'm playing with themes of masculinity and imagination and fantasy as they go on this road trip through the American West.
You kind of forgive me, but you kind of contradicted yourself. You said you haven't written anything in the fantasy genre, but you've been influenced by it because sci-fi is fantasy. To me, it is because it's not quote real.
Well, I think specifically, I don't mean fantastical things. Like I mean proper noun fantasy. So like stuff with like dragons and wizards and talking lions and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't disagree with you at all that most of my work, if not all of it, has a fantastical element to it. It just isn't necessarily presenting as these high fantasy, but definitely the zombies and demon monsters and viruses and other supernatural and science fiction sort of things are you have to have imagination. Like there has to be ability to go into a more fantastical frame of mind and buy into that world. So yeah, you're right. I totally do that.
Interesting.
Do you think you're ever gonna go to try to write or anything, or maybe you have that has the dragons and the volcanoes and the supernat and the unicorns and whatever, like all those?
No, I mean maybe I should, just because I did love that so much growing up. It was such a big part of my narrative intake, I guess.
You have
But I haven't
knowledge,
yet.
yeah, knowledge of the genre. I feel like I sometimes am kind of heading down a similar path in the sense that like I love comedy, and I love comedy movies and would tape old SNL episodes and all this stuff. But when I write, what comes out tends to be drama or sci-fi drama most of the time. With like the comedy isn't comedy writing there needs to be like you need to be like laughing out loud like every line, like line after line after line. Whereas I tend to write a dramatic scene where there might be like a moment of slight comic relief between the characters within a drama. I think that tends to be what comes out of me.
Well, Adam, I have to say that actually shows that I've seen called comedies on Netflix and Amazon, to me, they're just dramas that may be
Dark.
absurd. Yeah, mostly dark stuff, mostly dark. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the genre of comedy as it applies to definitely TV, if not, I mean, streaming, whatever you want to call it, if not movies, has really changed. I mean, do you all think that, or do you see that?
I think there's something to that, and I think comedy, like every comedy show that I guess that is especially one or movie that's successful, has its own sort of unique tone. Like there's different types of comedic tones, and even within like this is a satirical film, like that's so broad. Like there's like slapstick, there's all kinds of different subgenres of comedy, and I think there's definitely something to what you're saying about like
I think the most successful like TV sitcoms like Frasier, for instance, where there were no jokes, that all the comedy, all the humor came out of character and situation. And there was no false note. In other words, every character had a different voice, every character had different quirks. And for me, in my writing, I write about men. My main characters are men with strong supporting women, but I write about men. And someone said to me, "Well, why don't you write about have a woman be your main character?" I said, "Because why do you write about men? Why are the men your main characters?" And I said, "Well, I'm a woman, and I think I know women." Backwards and forwards. I go into a ladies' room at an event. I don't know anyone. I walk out. I know everyone's secrets, right, Juliet? Men do not know what goes on in the women's room. You're at the mirror, and all of a sudden, everybody's sharing. I know women. It's like, but men are a mystery. The opposite sex is a mystery. The object of my desire. And so it's like I'm trying to solve a problem. I'm trying to uncover some truth. But the thing about, I tell my clients, and when I guest teach in college, excuse me, I'm a little tired. It's been a long day. College classes, workshops, writers' conferences is you can have a theme at the back of your mind, but don't write from theme and never write with a message, because you'll be preaching to your audience. Let them get whatever message they're going to get. Write about characters that you can make as real as possible, facing problems and trying to solve them, and failing and succeeding, and failing and succeeding, and however it ends, But I think that you have to be, I just warn writers to be very, very careful not to write from holding a picket sign. You know what I mean? Don't, if you want to write about labor strife, write Norma Ray, where you had a real character with a real life, facing union organization. But we got to know this character, this real character who was faced with these issues and the choices that she made. And whether you're pro-union or anti-union, you understood, and you rooted for her, So otherwise, make a documentary where you have even when you make a documentary, you have to kind of try and stay neutral, even if you have a personal opinion, because you're trying to you're always, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, you're bringing something to an audience. Let them decide. Your audience is smart. Don't do their work for them, because they will reject you, right? And so this is, and I think Luke can, agree with this. This is the essence of subtext and dialogue, right? You know, it's like that on the nose dialogue when everybody says exactly what they mean and they don't have any secrets and it's back, you know, whatever. And people are so. I mean, I have a lot to say about this, and I don't want to go on and
No,
on. But
I remember. It's funny because I studied film at college at Syracuse in the Visual Performing Arts School. They also have the Newhouse Communication School, which has their own thing as well. But I remember they showed us the scene. I think it was a screenwriting class. It was from Annie Hall, and it was the scene where Woody Allen and Diane Keaton character were on the balcony, and they were kind of starting to get to know each other, and they had the subtext was written on the screen as a subtitle, and
That's
I had never
brilliant,
seen
right?
and I never seen anything like that before,
right.
and that was kind of like a profound like moment in terms. I don't know. I just love the like breaking the fourth wall and to extent so many different like film techniques were used, so to speak, just in that movie alone, just structurally and just like. Again, like the breaking the fourth wall, the Marshall McLuhan scene when he comes in, but especially that scene is where I kind of like understood like the what subtext is kind of resonated with me, and it's hard. I feel like it's hard to do what you're just even though it's simple, but the thing about the characters and you're beating them down and then they overcome and then you beat them down again and they overcome. I tend to like when I'm writing even like protect my characters too much, and I don't. I need to have them suffer more and make bigger choices and fail more. Maybe it does tie to my own fear of being vulnerable, especially when it comes to my main characters. Whether I'm writing a lead that's a male or a female, there's something about like a writer writing a main character and wanting to protect them.
You're protecting yourself. Here, I'll be your therapist. You're protecting yourself.
Right.
Absolutely. And I totally can understand that. Totally, you know, I have children and they're grown. And Mike Nichols said when he had his first child, he said, I'm now a hostage to fortune for the rest of my life. And even though they're grown, one of them lives here, one of them lives out of town. But when they're here and with me for an extended time, if they go out, I don't fall asleep till they come back. And they're really grown men, you know? It's like you just never stop, you know, worrying. You just can't make the worrying their problem, you know? So they're your children, Adam, and that you made these children, and you don't want them to hurt and you don't want them to suffer because you'll suffer, you know? I totally understand.
Right, but you know what my solution to the problem is? I outsource it, and I outsource it in the form of two ways off the top of my head. The writers group, which you guys all keep me accountable and aren't afraid to tell me when, like, you know, there needs to be more of these elements that we're discussing, and also we can get into this topic as well, the AI, the chat GPTs, and those sorts of artificial intelligence tools that can also kind of keep you accountable, or you know, yeah, you can ask it for its thoughts on certain things. Is this character being challenged? How can I maybe challenge if you give it parameters and enough context of what you're working on?
Right.
You know what? One of the kind of a touchstone piece for me was I was just starting to really think about story deeper. And after I think I just moved to LA and was starting to think about story deeper and like how good stories are really crafted. And I was working with, I did so many different like little random jobs, as I'm sure like most people have done when moved to LA, but I was assistant for this manager. And she was just another person in this building that I worked for. I worked for one company and then met her and then did some assistant work for her. And she got me teed into this idea of the dramatic dilemma and how your characters had to have two equally unappealing choices. So like the, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of choices. And they had to pick one of those. And then they get themselves into a deeper problem, and then they have another fork and another decision to make, and it keeps escalating, and then, you know, they either reach deep inside themselves and find the strength to triumph, or they get crushed by the world or the antagonist or whatever. But the show that really I thought did a fantastic job of doing that again and again and again, the escalation, was The Shield. Has any of you guys seen
Oh
that?
my God, I love that. I got so excited, my phone went over.
Yeah, but you
I
want like
adore that show for so many
Yeah.
reasons. Wait. Hold on. Let me rhapsodize about it, if you don't mind, for a moment. Okay, first of all, the cinematography. Come on, that is beautifully shot, and it's so raw, but it's so beautiful. The lighting. I mean, the way that. Oh man, and the character development, and this. And I guess I'm going to say the word ambiguous character, but he is basically a villain, a hero who's a villain. It was so well done. The way they developed the characters, even the way they brought on the celebrity guest stars, and they still, you have someone like Glenn Close, who, especially at the time, this is an older show, right, Luke?
Yeah.
She comes on the show, she's got star quality, and yet the writers and the director, and even her, the actor, whatever you want to call them, they're so good. They're so damn good that we're not distracted by her stardom. She just dissolves within the character.
It also has one of the great finales. I would say it's in the top 5 of finales. I watched it before streaming. I used to get 3 discs from Netflix and watch it. And I watched when I was in the final season. I started like at 9 o'clock at night, and I finished at 3 in the morning, weeping. Weeping because, and I'm not going to give it away if anybody hasn't seen The Shield, but weeping because it was over, and I loved these characters so much, so very, very much, and that ending, that
poetic,
ending,
right? Is that poetic?
I wish I had been in the writers' room when they came up with it, because it's like so anti. I'm not going to say any. Lucas, you both know it's one of the. That and The Americans has 2 of the greatest finales.
Great too. That was so
ever
well
seen.
done.
Now look, continue. We interrupted you. We're girls. We're interrupting. We interrupt each other all the time.
Good.
But go ahead. Continue. Continue. What did The Shield do for you?
That just that great. It was a great example of how you could continually escalate the conflict and put your hero in harder and harder situations, and then have them still be able to get out of it, but then find themselves in a new horrible situation. So yeah, it's fantastic. And I totally agree with you about how it looked. They shot on Super 16.
Really? I didn't know that. Thanks for that technical information.
Yeah, they shot on film. And that's part of why it has such a great grainy look, is because they were shooting on a smaller format film. So when you
gorgeous
enlarge it gets more grainy. One thing I really liked too was how incredibly good the day players were in it. Like actors that were just a small role in one episode, and that was it. They look like actual, like real people that would live in LA. They did a fantastic job just from like a visual perspective, like who they cast. And then the performances were fantastic. There's like maybe 1 or 2. My wife and I watched it a couple years ago all the way through.
Oh, cool.
And there was like maybe 1 or 2 of those day players that was not good out of like probably 200 or something. And I don't know how to do 7 seasons of a show at like that high a caliber is just incredibly impressive. And then like Sara Anne was saying, like to stick the landing at the end of 7 seasons, like there's not a lot of shows that have gone on that long that ended so well. There's so many, like Game of Thrones would be the most recent example of something that just kind of like cratered at the end, but The Shield was strong all the way through. So I think that really having like a very strong example of dramatic dilemmas and escalating a conflict was it came at the right time for me to really like kind of like pound it into my head.
Well, there's a when you started talking, immediately I thought of a film where our hero, our main character, has that dilemma, which is Chinatown, which is the script that is taught in that is held up as, the pinnacle, and this is what you should study, and all of that is Nicholson's character and the dilemmas he faces, the choices he has to make, the mysteries he's trying to solve. And what's so interesting about Chinatown is he's in every scene, and we know what he knows in real time. In other words, we're never behind him and we're never ahead of him. We're with him all the way, which makes us bind even more to the character and to the story and to the misconceptions and the assumptions and all of it. And if you haven't seen it, it's 50 years old. So spoilers, she's my sister, she's my daughter, she's my sister, she's my daughter. I mean, that's Robert Town and Polanski. They fought about the ending. On one of my favorite movies is Tootsie, and there were, Dustin Hoffman and Sidney Pollack had fistfights. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but almost fistfights every day, and that's because they were so invested. And sometimes that can create a crappy movie because they go to a third choice which doesn't work, some compromise that doesn't work. But a lot of the time, the passion is so high that the right choices are made. It's the creative process is so interesting. When I was in development with Michael Greskoff, it was a time of great development many years ago, and the studios, they were throwing money into development, and I read every script that came into the office because he was too busy, and all the agents. This is the greatest writer since Shakespeare, and 1 in 100, 1 in 150, he read. My boss, and he agreed, and we would call the writer in, and we never optioned anything. But our thing was, what are you passionate about? And we developed 20 scripts, and 3 of the movies got made, and we worked with novelists and got books published. But the creative process is for the creation of My Favorite Year, of the concept, was I read a script by a writer that had nothing to do with that. It was about a man who sought sanctuary in a church because he committed a crime. Well, wonderful writer. We called him in. What are you passionate about? He wanted to do some kind of road movie. My boss didn't want to do a road movie. He wanted to do something else. We weren't interested. And then he said, what else you got? And he said, well, I always wanted to do a film about Wyatt Earp and a young kid who idolizes him. And my boss said, well, we don't want to do Western, but Mel Brooks is around the corner, and he's always telling stories about working on the Live or Show of Shows, the comedy. I'm old enough to remember it, in the 50s with Sid Caesar, because that's where he cut his comedy chops. Neil Simon worked there, among other great writers. And so we started batting it back and forth, and we came up with an Errol Flynn character that Peter O'Toole eventually played. And we kind of fleshed it out a bit. And then we went around the corner to Mel's office and pitched it, and we had a deal within a week. So the reason why I'm telling you this is there were 3 reasonably intelligent people in a room, right? And we started off here, and boom, 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 and we wound up here, because the essence of creativity, when you're 2 or more people, they say in the 12-step programs, God says, where 2 or more of you are gathered, there I will be. Well, when 2 or more creatives are together, something will happen. But you can't predict it. And you have to just remember, if anybody listening, if you're ever pitching and people are feeding you ideas or in a story conference, there are no stupid ideas. It's not personal, no ad hominem attacks. Just every idea has merit because it can lead, even if it's rejected, it leads to something else. So this writer was telling us what he wanted to do. And my boss said, I don't want to do a Western, but, and that's how this movie that a lot of people really love came to be. And so, anybody who's listening who's a writer, let it flow, and don't be afraid to contribute when you're in a creative meeting. And only once in the 5 years I was with Michael, and we had many, many story conferences, there was one person who got personal, a famous actress, and I won't name her, but I dislike her to this day. She was a very famous actress. We were developing a project, and we were going over the script, and we were going in a scene, and I said, well, how about in this blah blah, and she said, that's stupid. Ooh. Which is, and I said, it's not stupid. I didn't care. I was very impressed with her. Come on. But to sit near her and be near her, it was like, oh my God, whatever. But at the same time, she just insulted me. And I said, it's not stupid. And I continued with what I had to say. And afterwards, my boss said, good for you. I said, because this is not how, this shuts everything down, you know? So even if you think it's stupid, everything leads to something else. And in the end, if you're all in there, you can come up with something positive. So those story conferences are really, really powerful and important.
The chat wants to know, Paul wants to know if you can give us a hint who the actress is. What does it rhyme with? Does it rhyme with Schmerl Schmeep?
No. Okay, we'll have a quiz. She's an Oscar winner.
Okay, she is an Oscar winner.
In the 70s, in the 1970s. And she won for, oh God, it was Jane Fonda.
Oh, fair enough.
Okay. I'm not going to say anything else because I got stories. And
we're breaking them on this live stream, I think.
I love the stories.
It's not like gossip, but that was my experience with her. She's very gifted and talented, and I think Clute is one of the greatest performances of all cinema. And I admire her as an actress, you know, and she's Henry Fonda's daughter and was sitting there. And she had an office down the hall and always wore her sunglasses. And she you know, whatever. I don't want to be here gossiping about her because
Too late.
Sitting there. Okay, I'm sitting there, and there's our writer, my boss, her, and me. Okay, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like this. I'm side eyeing her. I'm looking at her profile, and I'm thinking that's Henry Fonda's daughter. Oh my freaking God, that's Henry Fonda's. So there's this part of me that's like in total awe. Hollywood royalty, great actress, Oscar winner, one of my favorite movies. And then she kind of was a bitch to me. So whatever, you know. I tell the story not so much to diss her because, you know, who cares, but just to say, don't do that. You know, there's no stupid ideas. There aren't, because anybody can throw something out that really will never work, but there's a kernel in there and someone will pick up on it and then move to something that's viable and doable. Okay. So this is just, if I were lecturing in a class about pitching, about story conferences, be open. And if you're pitching, don't argue with the producers or the studio executives.
I think that's a beautiful lesson. And it kind of reminds me of the improv, yes, and.
Yes.
You know, to keep that yes and attitude, no matter how absurd. You know what I always think of when people, or even I say, oh, how the heck did that succeed? Well, how the heck did people like that? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What the hell is that, right? I know what that is, but I'm just saying, if that can work, then all bets are off. And yes, and, right?
That's definitely a good attitude to have, and I think I generally have that attitude. But when I get a response that I'm not looking for, or it feels like someone's telling you that's a stupid idea, you do kind of like feel it on the inside. I feel it, and that maybe if I can feel it, I'm actually showing in my face that I'm disgusted, even though I might be saying, oh, that is an interesting idea, but inside I'm like, how dare you say that to me? At least for a moment, I'm kind of like,
you mean when someone's giving you feedback on your script?
Yeah, I'm initially resistant. My brain is resistant, and my emotions are resistant. Not that it lasts, normal. And not that I don't. I'm curious to the degree that I show that, I guess, is what
I'm with you. I hate notes because what I write is perfect. You know, don't get, you know.
Right.
But then you kind of relax, and someone says, "Well, how about if she, you know, I think she should," and you go, "No," and then you go, "Well, maybe." Oh, yeah, that'll work.
It's okay to take a second to think about things. It's okay to like kind of reflect on an idea, not make a decision right away. And for me, I tell myself it's okay to not have this solution to every problem and every question in a script right away, because that can feel overwhelming. Just because you don't have the answer now doesn't mean you're not going to have it later. And usually the answer comes when I just sit down in front of the computer and look at my notes and look at the script and just dedicate the time to just thinking about it. And even if it doesn't come that day, it'll probably come the next day, and you could usually move on to something else. This conversation's been definitely like helpful for me, and I feel like inspirational for me to like just talking this stuff about the characters and beating the hell out of your characters and what's priority in sort of the creative exchange, regardless of what the relationship dynamic is. The whole idea of being open, and a lot of these things seem like common sense and like obvious, but not everyone, like you're saying, behaves with these prevailing attitudes, and it's good to be reminded of them. And to be, and even like it's good for me to hear this, is to be more bold and more proactive and more vulnerable with my own work, and also be willing to like share ideas with people, and being okay with not having all the solutions to every creative script thing idea, because like you're saying, just because I don't have the answer, if I throw a half-baked idea out there, that can get the ball rolling towards something.
Also, when you're writing, this is what I truly believe. In a sense, you're in control of your characters. You sit down to write a scene and you know what you want, what you want to achieve. But then, at least for me, my characters start talking to me. I mean, they'll take over. They're smarter than me. My characters are smarter than me because they're plumbing the depths, They're remembering something I forgot from 20 years ago that I need to use. But I'm more mature than they are. They want to stay in a scene forever, and it's my job to get in and get out. I want to ask Luke, when you get notes, how do you handle notes or feedback from people on your writing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I agree with what Adam was saying. Often you get that note and you're like, no, that's horrible, and then you think about it and you're like, actually, there is something to that. So I never argue or explain when I get a note. If I don't agree with it, I'll just pass it up, and then that's it. I don't have to worry about it. It's different. You have to think about who the note is coming from. Like, are they a stakeholder? And if it's the director or the producer on something I'm editing, then I do the note. Depending on a relationship, I might present an alternate option, something that I think would accomplish the note, maybe in a more elegant way, or just a way I like better. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, let's try your way. And sometimes they'll say, no, I really want it like this. And then you just do it. When it's your own work, it's a little different, especially when you're doing stuff that's spec, when someone's not paying you for it and people are giving you notes. I always try to see if it's discerning if it's a taste note or if it's a actual story problem note. And like figuring that out is something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of work. And you have to know also what you're trying to do with the piece and know, does this note push the project in the direction that I'm trying to take the project? Or does this note push the project in the direction that they want the project to go? And if they're not paying for it, then that's a note that doesn't need to be considered. Now, the part that they're giving a note on, there might be a real problem with it. But often I find that people give prescriptive notes when they really need to give descriptive notes. So they're telling you what the fix is instead of describing the problem. And when they describe the problem, like what Adam was saying, you have the note and you sit and you think, and you're like, all right, they don't like the character's motivation in this scene doesn't work. Like they don't believe that the character would decide this thing, that if they don't decide it, the rest of my script won't work. So instead of changing the rest of my script, how can I change this moment? And thinking about, where you want to go and recognizing that if people have a bump on something, there might actually be a problem, even if the solution they gave is not the right one. So yeah, trying to figure out that taste versus taste notes versus like story problem notes, and trying to
are they advocating, or are they just trying to voice their opinion? Are they coming from ego, or are they coming from a desire to serve? And
that's something that's a question that comes up in working in sort of the reality TV unscripted world as well. Because, I get why people want to put their stamp on a project, but sometimes it's people just feel like they need to contribute to feel like they contributed a note or a thought on, and get their hands on something. And something I think we often ask each other in the writers group is like, what is like you're saying, Luke, what is your intention? What is your goal with this project? Because you want to gear the notes to what, and we could sometimes that's the start of the conversation, because the writer doesn't always know what the end goal, so to speak. might be, and that requires a brainstorming type conversation. But for me, I do look for like consensus with notes. If I share something with the group and or outside the group or AI, whatever, and I'm getting something that multiple people are telling me, that should probably be a bell that goes off, that that's worth looking into. And a lot of the time, it's just like, am I resisting doing more work? Like, do I want am I going for the path? Am I bullshitting myself, telling me this is great already because I don't want to do more work? I want to move on to the next thing. I want to move on to the next phase. The rewriting can be painful, especially if you don't have the solutions or the answers to the problems. We all want to be, I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say we all want to be further ahead in our projects than whatever step or phase we're at right now. But those are the kinds of the questions. There are multiple people telling me the same thing, the same note, and kind of, am I resisting doing more work on something that needs?
And who do you take notes from? Like in a piece of music,
the
for
source.
Instance. Oh yeah, consider the source. Also, here's something interesting that you may apply to different art forms, including film or screenwriting. In any art form, is who is perceiving and from what place do they perceive? For instance, in a song, me as a musician, I hear a song, I'm going to hear the bass line. I'm going to hear whether the singer is saying lyrics that I agree with. What's going on with that drum beat? How is it produced? All these little tiny details that can get in the way of hearing the song as a whole. However, if I play the song, maybe a song I just wrote, to like an 8-year-old child, I'm going to get a really holistic, pure, and truly childlike perception and then feedback. So this is a precious thing. So in the same way, if you have a short film, say, Luke, you have great short films. I really liked Certified. That was, speaking of children. Wow. I love a double entendre there, dude. It's beautiful. So anyway, you play that short, and how did you get that actress to act that way? Unbelievable, man. It's brilliant work, dude. Brilliant work. Anyway, so if you play that short, it's not really children's material. That's not a great example, but to somebody who's not a filmmaker, then they have one perception, then they may have some feedback that goes into one category, but a filmmaker will have, or a cinematographer, or somebody who's a musician, about how you use the music. They'll have a totally different perspective and different notes and different ideas. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's important. And it's worth considering.
Yeah, everyone's opinion.
And then there comes the point where you got to let all that go and let everybody go and sit down and rewrite, And I think thinking is good for me. If I consciously think, that's helpful, sit down and make notes and, write things down. But sometimes I'm watching something on TV, and it happens for when I work with clients and their work, their screenplays, or my own work. I don't know, something goes off in my head because I'm not thinking about it. And I have a solution. Oh, I know what to do. It's also, I tell writers, if you're stuck, go take a shower, go for a swim, wash the dishes, because something about our bodies, our hands, and when we put in water, it relaxes us. It's a connection to creativity. Try writing a scene on a yellow pad with a pen or a pencil. Get away from your computer, because there's something about the energy that goes from your hand to the paper through the pen. I think sometimes we overthink.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why I say my characters very often are smarter than me, because I will be in a scene and all of a sudden their character, I'll type it and I'll go, wait a minute, and I just keep going. You're a channel sometimes. I mean, I don't want to get all woo-woo here. Sometimes it's hard work. Writing it's in the rewriting. I believe it's in the writing is actually, the actual I'm writing right now is rewriting, where you're crossing things out and, reworking things and deleting. But I think in the act of the actual creativity, something else is going on, especially when you're into it, because in the winter months when I write and it's dark early in the afternoon and there's no lights and I look up and what time is it? And I'm not regretting the past or fearing the future. I'm totally in the moment. Creativity actually is life-saving because it keeps us in the moment. Keeps us in the moment.
I can't help.
Quotable.
I
That's
can't help but think.
quotable.
Yeah, I can't help but think of like sports, like a sports analogy, like an athlete, a pro athlete being in the zone and hitting a bunch of 3-pointers in the row and being on fire and being in the moment, as you say. And I remember someone on a musician, she said she thought of her art and her music as a vessels. Like it was sort of like you're saying, you're not really totally in control. And I do kind of lose myself I definitely lose myself in the world when I'm writing. I'm sure we all have our own little rituals and setups and music that we play or music that we don't play when we're writing. But I can really definitely, if I close all the proper windows on my monitors, like really lose myself in the world of the characters, and sometimes it does kind of feel like you're not totally in control, and it's a cool feeling.
I just wanted to share that I've been watching the Netflix, The Lincoln Lawyer. Anybody watching that series?
Not yet.
I resisted it for a long time because I love the movie so much and McConaughey and that whole character, and I've read all the Michael Connelly books, and so I finally gave in. And I have to tell you, after 20 episodes. There's another season to go. These characters are in me. I mean, I'm not going to say they're my family, but I think about them because they're so well written and they're so compelling, and I miss them. I can't wait to start season 3, and that's kind of like, I mean, it brings to mind the investment we have in characters and what they mean to us, whether we're writing them ourselves or we've experienced them. It's like when you finish a series like The Shield, and I cried not only because of that ending, because it was heartbreaking. It was brilliant. It was heartbreaking. It was whatever, I don't want to give it away, but also because I wasn't going to be with these people anymore.
Me too.
Yeah, it's so, you become very vulnerable when you series like The Americans, that ends,
So
that's
good.
finale.
So good. I just got to chill. A chill.
A chill. Yeah, a chill.
It's been suggested to me. I mean, I forget who in our group or whatever the writers group was saying to, sort of work more on character bios and even I wrote like a diary for one of my main character, like a diary that was meant to take place over the course of a few weeks before what I was going to write. Like I'm writing this web series inspired by my short film, The Edited. So I wrote a diary from the point of view of the main character that took place like maybe like a month before the events of what I was going to like write as far as the screenwriting. And it was kind of helpful to really sort of lose yourself in that character, in that world, and it was freeing. I could say anything. Like I knew where I kind of wanted to go, but I can still have enough freedom to be like have a sense of discovery, and it was all off screen anyway, so nothing could be wrong. I'm not committed to anything, so there's something to that. I think like I mean, what are your thoughts, Luke or Sara Anne and even Juliet, about like how much time should be spent on character bio, if even for like let's say like a feature film project, like, because it doesn't matter what the character's middle school experience was like, and what crowd did they go, who was their best friend, what, like all these like psychological things. Like,
wait, I got a question for you, Adam, because I love this idea of you building this diary for the main character. Do you share this with, because I know that you're building this into a series, are you going to share that diary with your actors or not, or with the main character actor?
I think I probably should or would, or at the very least partially.
That sounds cool to me.
Hopefully, I remember to.
Well, I'll answer the question, and then Luke can chime in. I tell students and clients, here are the rules about screenwriting. Here are the rules. There are no rules. Here are the rules. There are no rules.
It's great.
If somebody says, well, and I should write a diary, I should write a bio, you if it works for you. This isn't school. This isn't your mother with your expectations of you cleaning your room. This is whatever works for you. Some writers have to outline every single scene to the end and then Elmore Leonard, the novelist who wrote Get Shorty, is brilliant. He said, I didn't even know what my story was. I had an idea, I had a character. He said, I sit down, page 1. He had no idea. The story revealed itself as he wrote. That was his, quote, process. So anybody tells you what you should be doing, there are no shoulds. Just whatever works for you.
That's important for me to hear, even right now at this point, just because you can get caught up in there's a way to approach this. There's a way to do things. I need to sit down 9 to 5 and write 8 straight hours, break for lunch. It's not, it's more like the short bursts of the hour, take a break, and then whatever, come back to it. It's not, everyone has their own sort of thing. And the key thing is to be disciplined enough and be continuing to put
listen,
the pen on the page.
The script that got me an agent years ago, it was an idea a former writing partner and I had a million years ago. Anyway, I was working full time, and on Saturdays I was busy. I wrote it on Sundays for a year, edited it, and I got an agent from that. So it took me a year, but I only could write on Sundays because I was too tired, when I came home. But I was thinking about it all the time. So that's how I got a script that got out there, got me meetings. So there are no rules. Luke?
Yeah, I think it's whatever works for you. I think there is a right way to write a script or a short story or whatever, but it's right for a specific writer, not for everyone. So I know the sorts of ways that I like to work, but those might not be the same. I'm assuming they're not the same as Adam or Sarah or Juliet. Like, we all have our own ways. And if you can commit to it, if you can find what works for you and then you can stick with it, you can have the discipline, whether it's, writing on Sundays or writing for an hour before you go to your day job. Like that's what will help you, actually complete things. And a big part of it's just like learning yourself. Like, what is the motivation you need? What can you do to set yourself up for success? Like, this thing I've been thinking about a lot recently is removing friction. So looking at those points where a project stops or where you slow down or where you lose motivation, and really examining your process and examining the situation you're in, and trying to remove those. Like, for instance, the web series that I'm working on, where I go and edit and rewrite the first feature that I ever wrote right out of film school. I started the project like 2 years ago, probably. And my initial idea was I was going to do a live rewriting section. So I was going to stream it, and I was going to read this script that I hadn't read for 15 years for the first time, and talk about how horrible it was, and then come up with a solution and rewrite it like on the fly. And it was super fun. Like, I really liked doing the live session, but the problem was I would end up with like an hour and a half or 2 hours of record. And then I wanted to cut it down to 15 minutes.
Oof.
And I just had such a hard time doing it because it was so unfocused. And the thing that made it interesting live made it very hard to condense and to make into like a watchable thing that someone could be like, oh, I'm going to watch this 10-minute video, or I'm going to watch this 15-minute video. And that was like the point of friction. Was I had I had some technical troubles too, which added friction, but the big part was just the volume of footage. Like, I loved the idea. The idea was still inspiring to me, but the amount of footage I got was just, it made it so I wasn't ever going to finish it. I wasn't going to finish an episode. It was too much. It was too daunting. And I don't think the material I had would have been able to be condensed. So I saw that, like, the large amount of footage as being like the real point of friction on the project. And so I kind of retooled it, and I was like, well, everything else about it I like, and it's doable. So if I can start from a place where I don't have that much editing to do, and I have something that's more contained, then I think I can actually move forward on the project. So it's working so far, but yeah, finding those points of friction where what's slowing you down or what's keeping you from doing the writing or the other creative ventures, or the could be chores, could be housework, like whatever that is, like find those points of friction and then work to eliminate them.
The second act. That's the problem. The second act, because we set up the world and you know how it ends, and then you've got to create the conflict, the ups and downs. Listen, everybody, this has been awesome. I have to get up extremely early tomorrow, and so I have to kind of like wind down.
No problem. I appreciate it. Thank
I
you.
would love to stay and talk some more. I mean,
Yeah,
what's
come
the
back
best
on.
way for me to let other people who are listening? I don't know how. I've seen some of the comments, and thank you for your comments. Yes, it's very hard. Yes, the let go and let God thing is really important. Whatever your God, your creative muse, your whatever. I mean, I've appreciated the comments that the listeners, the viewers, listeners have put up there. So thank you for that.
Yeah, they're cool. Thank you, everybody.
How do I let people know if they want to contact me?
Well, I say if we got fox-editworks.com.
Okay, let me just tell everybody that the phone number on that is, I have to go in and change it, is voicemail only. It's voicemail only. So I'm going to put my cell in the chat.
Are you sure?
Why?
I don't know, but maybe the voicemail is better. The email is better. I think you're good.
Listen, I'll tell you what. If anybody wants to contact me, email me also, because sometimes on voicemail people are muffled, and you can't get the phone number. So I won't put my cell. I'll follow your advice, Adam. Maybe there's a stalker out there. I don't know. But just email me and leave a message, so that way I'll know that you've contacted me. And if nobody contacts me, that's absolutely fine. My abandonment issues will come up big time, and then I'm going to have to call Juliet and get hypnotized. So it's all on you guys. So there you go. All right. This has been a pleasure to come back at some time. Luke, it's great to see you again and hear what you have to say. Lovely to meet you, Juliet. Adam, as always.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you
Sarah
so much.
Anne.
Love you,
Mina.
Mina.
Great to hear what you had to say. Love what you
Bye,
had to say.
everybody.
Bye-bye
Take
now.
care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Oh, I booted her. I think we left at the exact same time as we clicked at the exact same time. You know what I like to try to do? I try to like know what I'm gonna be working on before I sit down to write. Like know what I need to be working on. Like just
good.
This is the scene I have to do. This is the thing. This is the thing I have to think about, outline, rather than sitting down trying to figure out what I need to be working on. Because that's just doesn't seem like I might as well. I'd rather get started on the thing, whatever the thing is, even if it's not writing dialogue or writing a scene in script format. Like it's all things that need to get done. Adam has always has cool people on, says Stoner here in the chat. What's that?
Do you ever use and this could be for Juliet too, the hanging string method?
Explain that.
So it comes from knitting or crochet maybe, or sewing. I don't know, one of those needle crafty things. But basically, you don't work until you run out of ideas. So you stop, like say I'm writing a scene and I finish the scene and I could write the next scene, but instead of writing that next scene, I'll just leave myself a couple notes. Like I have a good idea what it's going to be. I leave myself a couple notes, and then when I start the next session, I have a place to start. Like I have a string hanging, and so you've got like a something to grab onto and something to, get your creative juices and get yourself going. Because that, like what Adam was saying, like sitting down and be like, all right, what am I going to work on today? Like time to be brilliant on 3. Like that's really hard.
That's exactly
Luke.
what I do.
It's great.
Yeah,
I love that idea.
That's essentially what I do. And I think there's, especially for screenwriting, there's a sort of like natural breaking point. Like for me, it's like especially if it's a bigger scene where there's going to be a lot of outlining and a bunch of things happening within the scene. Like I feel tired like by the end of like writing the scene, because then I'll be sidetracked. I'll be rewriting dialogue. End up kind of sidetracked, maybe researching something for the scene, or just diving into it, whatever the stops and starts within that writing session are. So by the end of the half hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever it is, even if I've only written 2, 3, 4 pages, I'm like kind of like tired by the end of it, and I'm not like, I don't want the next scene. I can't even think about it. I'm too. I can't go on to the next scene now. No, but like Luke is saying, like hopefully I have enough of an outline where I can get started on the next scene the next day. Or I mean, a lot of the time when writing the scene that comes before the next one, you're gonna generate ideas that are gonna be like notes that you have to throw in there. Oh, that's a good idea for the next thing. Let me throw it in there, and that kind of stuff helps you get started as well.
That's a great technique. I think in any creative endeavor, you can use that technique.
I
Just
think
keeping yourself in a little bit of suspense.
Yeah, I think even in life, I have I have a lot of notes and things and different documents, but even just like my little Post-it note, oh, what do I have to do in my life tomorrow when I wake up, like let alone in a script with characters and stories.
Indeed.
When you're writing music, Juliet, do you start with the lyrics? Do you start with the music, or like a chord or something, or what's your process like?
I start with a theme, actually. And then when it's really has that inspired feeling, it would be simultaneous that the lyrics and the melody come together. But interestingly enough, I used to start with some chords, and I was a terrible guitar player. That didn't stop me. And a friend of mine at the time made a powerful suggestion. He said, you're a terrible guitar player. And I said, thank you. And he said, so here's my advice. Don't write songs with your guitar, because you will limit yourself to how good a guitar player you are, which is true. And he said, just write the music and the lyrics pure from the air, from the skies, from your imagination, from wherever inspiration comes from. Take them. And that's how I've been writing songs ever since. And that, I think, is whatever you build first is going to be the foundation of what you build eventually, right? Of what your completed project is, right? So what you want to be the strongest is going to be the melody and the lyrics. So if that's strongest, then, for instance, your song could be done as a country song that you wrote as a house music song, because it has a strong melody and a strong lyric. Or your song could be done as any other kind of genre. And in the same way, a story has its strength in the character development, in the dialogue, in the foundation of the story. And in that way, it can be done in any kind of time frame, theoretically.
Yeah,
for sure. Ironlonger here in the chat was just, I think, on one of his streams. He's a musician as well.
Cool.
Was talking to another musician, and Ironlonger, what was the who'd you have on recently? But they were talking about ragtime and how some of the words and some of the artists, like, they said some really controversial things and some racist things or things and whatnot, but like you can like get away with more humor and jokes and subversive things within music, even if like there's something unique about having dark lyrics over happy sounding music, or having happy sounding, or having darker music with like more uplifting lyrics. These sort of juxtapositions make, I don't know, art unique. Not just to be very trite, I guess, about it.
That's a cool point. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, Foundering. Definitely look up that content. He's on YouTube, Rumble.
Check it out. I will check it out. Thank you for
subversive satirical ragtime songs. Do I have that correctly? They're both piano players and singers.
Cool.
Yeah,
I like the unusual stuff.
And modern ragtime. It's a modern, like a current band that's doing it.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. Yeah, right. Interesting.
So it's ragtime, but it's current ragtime.
I guess so. Yeah.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
Cool. I definitely appreciated the time, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. What else do you think? What else should we be discussing, or talk about, or creative journeys?
Well, Adam, what's next for you?
For me,
Yeah.
for the rest of tonight, or for in my life.
Just in your creative journey. What are you working on next?
Well, I'm working on launching the web series inspired by the short film, the dystopian sci-fi drama about the earnest misfit girl who enters the new high school in the new part of the country and finds it's a strange school where they literally edit history, science, literature to basically maintain control over the society. They teach that Big Brother is the hero of 1984 in this short film, which I'm working on turning into a longer form series, but initially, I guess what you would call a web series. Do people still use the term web series, Luke, or is it just online?
I think so, right, Luke?
I think so. I think people still use it. Yeah.
It's still a thing. It's just a series that's shorter, but either way, that's what I'm working towards, and starting to put this together, some graphics. I built out the Indiegogo crowdfunding camp. I can't wait anymore for money and things to fall out of the sky to get going, to get this off the ground. I have to be, I think, vulnerable and put it out there, and I think do my best to make it happen. This is independent filmmaking, so I'm not we'll see how much money I ultimately need to raise to produce this. It's not millions, but it's not going to be $600 either. So we'll put it together. I'll get the performers and the actors to come on hopefully this show, promote, and I'll invite myself on whatever podcasts I can get onto, and hopefully maybe get some sponsors and things like that. And I got setting up all the rewards for the campaign. So that's what I'm kind of focusing on. I'm exploring at this time. I'm actually also exploring some different professional opportunities as well. I'm putting out some feelers, and I'm open to different possibilities. And I think I've discussed that with you a little bit offline. Juliet, I forget how much I've talked about other professionals.
We talked a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit with Luke too. So we'll see. It's a time of like transition for me,
Right on. And
right
Luke,
now.
so the Jackalope movie or Jackalope series or the Jackalope, what is it?
Yeah, it's a feature script. So
awesome.
I have just started. So I did my vomit draft, 130 pages, so way too long. And so I'm in the process of doing my first revision right now. So my first session, I trimmed out like 5 pages, but I'm pretty sure those were the easiest 5 pages to get rid of. So I'm gonna do like a, I don't know, vision board's not the right word, but like a
it's cute though.
Note cards. I'm gonna do like note cards for all the scenes, and write a little bit like this scene is doing this scene is doing that. So I have a feeling like I'm gonna have a lot of scenes that are duplicates, that are like something different is happening in them, but they're serving the same function.
I fall into that trap. We saw this scene, we established this already, even though it's a different location, but it's accomplishing something that was already it's not new information.
Yeah.
What I did really love about that story that you shared with us about or the Jackalope, if you're going to take in this direction, maybe you're going to take it in a different direction, but it really was a story, if I recall, about friends and rediscovering friendship, but also it being about not finding the jackalope, so to speak, but about the journey. Like these sort of universal archetypal stories and universal themes. Like I think it's a great vehicle, a great avenue for that you want to tell. It's all about it's about the journey. Like that theme alone is never going to get old for our species, because we always get caught up in. It's just like, it's some kind of like trap. We always think we're trying to get to the next. We're trying to get that thing. Yeah. If I get that thing, my life is going to be awesome. If that thing happens, my life is going to be amazing. If this happens, then everything's going to be perfect. But that's never really about that. It's about the journey, or
No, sorry, I got excited again. That's what happens. No, but you're so right, Adam. And the thing is, proof of this is how many really miserable, ultra rich people there are out there. I'm not saying it wouldn't take their money. I'm just saying that it's true. You think you reach a goal and you're going to be happy, and you realize that getting to that goal and going through that process was really the happy.
Yep.
Yeah, I probably, and then starting over, like again, like I think in sports metaphors a lot, like the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, but like that doesn't mean anything for next year. They got to like start all over, rebuild the thing, and it's the same way with probably a new season on a production or a new feature film, or stand-up comedy set, especially like after a comedian puts out a special, it's like, okay, that was amazing, but like now you have to like duplicate that same level of laughter every joke, every line again from scratch, and build it up in the clubs, and then build out the duration, the length, if your comedian's building out now. Just something about that. I guess it's almost like there's something natural about maybe even the creative process with like nature and the way the earth is rotating and the year and all that, like just like, oh, we have these sports seasons and these renewal like conclusions and rebirths and renewals, whether it's a film or whatever creative endeavor, a band putting out a new album, going on a tour. It's like just like these we like new challenges. If we're not it almost look at me bringing it back full circle to the whole idea of like curiosity. Even you have to keep your curiosity levels up and not become I guess complacent, because it's even like unhealthy. It's like it's unhealthy to rest on your laurels, even if you had success or whatever, to not be, I think, active and challenging yourself in some way. It keeps it's not as healthy for your brain. Your brain wants to be, and I think how we stimulate ourselves is unique to ourselves. So whether it's like we need to be creative and write, but to other people that might be like something else that stimulates their curiosity, even if it's just reading or if it's playing chess, like whatever it is that stimulates the brain, you got to keep that sort of, it's not a muscle, but an organ.
It is kind of like a muscle. I think you're onto something there, Adam. Yeah. It's an ability. It's a habit. It's a skill even.
Mind muscle, I guess they call it. Your mind muscle.
Yeah. I like that. It was really nice to speak with you, gentlemen, and with the lady who was here.
Oh, yeah.
Sara Anne.
Sara Anne Saran.
She had so much wisdom and so many interesting stories to share.
Yeah, I got to get her back on at some point. She was funny. I mean, I don't know how many live streams and podcasts she's been, maybe a few over the years, but I guess it's probably good that I stopped her from giving out her phone number on the show.
You were good. No, you were good.
Yeah, and we'll see if Jane Fonda's reps reach out to her and any sort of I think that'll be fine. But this is now a gossip podcast, and we're also breaking news. I consider that,
And thanks for introducing me to Luke's work, which I really find wonderful, and I'm going to check it out more fully. So thank you for that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, everyone's Twitters are in the Twitter X's are in the episode description. I'm sure you could follow everybody. And
yeah, I'm probably much more offensive in my X postings than I am in person. But
aren't we all? That's the point. Well, if you're going to give a free speech platform to people, that needs to be tested, I think.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cool. Well, why don't you tell people where they can follow you, Juliet? Anything you want to plug, promote, any other last words? I'll give you the floor.
Well, my new website for hypnotherapy is silverlakehypnotherapy.com. So you can go there and leave me information if you like. And I am doing free sessions with people I know right now, with acquaintances and friends right now, because I'm just starting out. So if you have anything that you'd like to stop doing or you'd like to start doing, like smoking or losing weight or who knows what else is going on. Everybody's different. And the cool thing, I think, I'm not going to give a whole speech, but about hypnotherapy is I don't have to know about your whole past. Hypnotherapy is about taking you from where you are right now and getting you to where you want to be.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm down. I'm down. We just have to
Good for
schedule it.
you.
I think
You're
that's
awesome.
that's the biggest thing.
He's an adventurer.
I'm afraid I'll say too much.
Impossible.
I'll share too much.
It's okay. You're
Yeah,
safe.
I know. Yeah, we're already good friends, and I enjoy
There you
talking
go.
to you. So if I'm going to overshare, it should be within the appropriate. This is the appropriate forum for that. So in that regard, it's a safe place, so to speak.
There you go.
What about you, Luke?
You can find my work at my website, which is lukeasa.com, and Twitter or X and YouTube. No, it's just X. It's first name, last name. So LukeEguidici. That's Instagram and Twitter. And my YouTube is I think it's Luke Asa also. So yeah, check me out
And
there.
your last name, Luke, your last name, is the first G hard or soft? Is it Judici or Guidici?
Hard, Judici.
Okay, Judici. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. It's
Say it
Corsican.
again?
So Judici.
Okay, so I just learned that. That's
It's fine. It's Corsican, so it's like pronounced a little bit different than a normal Italian name. So yeah.
This was my Italian Jewish podcast I had going this week. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Guys in the chat as well. Juliet and Luke rule Adam is okay at best. I'll take it, Paul. Paul Sibrev wants to start smoking. I don't know if you could hypnotize him into getting going with the smoking. That could be a thing. I'll think about what my goals and I guess they're kind of public now, but we can talk more. PeopleWeLovePodcast.com. Like, subscribe, share, comment. I'm on all the things. Links in the descriptions.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you guys. I think
Thank you, Luke.
pretty
Nice to
much
meet
it.
you.
You got it, guys.
Great
Take care.
stuff. Bye-bye now.
Peace.